Hello and welcome to another edition of the show where we take a wander around the week in Apple, Apple News, reviews, technology, associated products and all sorts of other things that catch our eye. This is another episode of the Essential Apple Podcast. Hello listeners and welcome back to the Essential Apple. And all I have to say is, what the actual hell? I go on holiday for a week and the internet has gone berserk. It's crazy. We've had all sorts, absolutely everything. Samsung shipped some Fold review units, which were a bust, literally. Then they've said they're going to delay, quote unquote, the launch. Johnny Ive gave an interview saying he lives in the future. No surprise there, really, I suppose. Tim Cook says he believes in doing the right thing. I guess ditto on that one. Apple have got into a row about pulling screen time apps. Loads of stuff has happened. So, to talk with me about that, I am joined this week by Nick. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Simon. Yeah, good to be back. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem. No, not a problem. I can't believe it. We had 2 fairly slow weeks, and then I take a week off to, for Easter, and it's all gone mental.
That serves you right for having time off.
Oh, yeah, fancy that. Dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Well, where shall we start? Well, I suppose we have to start with the story that everybody is covering. We would start with Samsung's Fold, the Galaxy Fold. I don't want to go on about it too much, really, because everybody's talking about it and it's all been rehashed to death. But for anybody who doesn't know, the Galaxy Fold was shipped to a bunch of reviewers. All the big names had one, and it was a bust. Quite literally, for a variety of reasons, it seems. But most, I say most. A fairly sizable number appear to have broken within about 48 hours. Not a good look.
They're not folding it right. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, that's it. Not folding it right. Everybody's made that joke, I have to admit.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. It just seems to me horribly embarrassing for Samsung, I should think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember talking about this on Bart's show when they first announced they were going to do a folding phone.
Yeah.
And him saying, in some ways, this is great because it's like Samsung are doing the beta testing for everybody. They'll try all the stuff that doesn't work, and it appears that's spot on. That's exactly what they've been doing. They've been sort of beta testing out with the reviewers.
The strange thing is, people who know about this sort of thing have said, this isn't like something that Samsung rushed out. They've been working on folding screens for like a decade.
And, and you wouldn't really put out something that you thought was going to break, would you?
No,
that easily.
I
know there were issues. I know there were issues with people removing what they thought were screen protectors and they weren't.
Yes, that was the thing. I mean, that, again, seemed very slapdash, that they had this protective layer, which should not be removed because it's, an integral part of the screen protection. But if you see the photographs of it, it just looks like a screen protector stuck on the front. I mean, why on earth it doesn't go under the bezel if you don't want people to pick at it? It just struck me as very strange. But the biggest problem seems to be something which I guess is inherent to the very design of it, which is that at the hinge, like when you close your wallet, there's a small gap between the screen and the frame.
I read one article which said that, I can't remember who it was from, I'm afraid, but they said that it was the largest gap they'd ever seen in a mobile phone. In the actual where dirt could ingress into was actually the largest they'd ever seen. So it's not surprising that that's happened.
I mean, I know I listened to Dieter Bohn and on The Verge, I think, and he was when he's broke, he was absolutely like, oh my God, I've broken it. What have I done? And he said he spent the whole night thinking of things he could have done that might have caused it to break. Down to the point that he was worried that somehow the modelling clay that they'd used to hold it up while they photographed it had somehow got into the hinge and worked its way through and gone behind the screen and broken it, all of which sounded very unlikely to me. But so yeah, it's all very strange. And then obviously they've said they're at first they said they weren't going to postpone the launch. It was going ahead, and a few broken ones was just bad luck.
Par for the course, yeah.
Yeah, and then they pulled it. Then they said they're postponing it. Now, apparently the official line is they're talking about a mid-June launch. But I don't see how you're going to do very much with a product like that in that short a time.
I suppose it depends on how. I suppose it depends on what was causing the issues. I mean, another of the articles that I read about it said that unfortunately, when I'm going to forget the name of them again, aren't I? What type of screen is it?
Well, it's a sort of flexible OLED of some kind.
OLED, that's it. OLED is what I was trying to think of. The inherent problem with OLED screens is when they do fail, they fail pretty spectacular, and they don't just take a few pixels; they'll just take the whole screen out. So it was yeah. So yeah, I just can't believe they would put something out that would break so easily. I don't believe these reviewers would have gone out of their way to break them.
No, I don't.
They might have gone out of their way to check the flexibility of the hinge and because if you're going to fold it thousands and thousands and thousands of times, you're going to want it to be pretty robust, aren't you?
Well,
so that's not treating it badly. That's just
from what I could figure out, most people seem to think that the hinge itself was an incredibly clever piece of engineering, and it has gears in it which make it work like paired. It's paired, so you can't, even if you try and open one side, the other side opens proportionately because they're linked together by gears to prevent you somehow, twisting or unfolding the screen in a unsuitable manner. So a lot of thought has gone into it. I mean, I'm sure
there has. I mean, you don't throw. As we've probably said before when we've been discussing these things, phones don't just appear. No. It's not like someone has a thought a couple of weeks before and thinks, I know, we'll do it this way.
Just throw some bits together, yeah.
Yeah. They've been planning it for years. So, it seems very unfortunate.
One of the only comments I kind of thought might address it in any way, shape or form was Carolina Milanese said on Tech Pinions, I think, although she's been on a couple of other podcasts, was that because they've had these things in the labs and obviously they've been working with them, have they kind of, become acclimatized to what you can and can't do with this phone? And at no point have they given it to somebody and said, take it out in the real world for 48 hours and see what happens.
Yeah, you see, even that I find unlikely.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing testing, you don't just hand it out to people. I mean, the whole point of testing is that you hand it to people who don't know anything about it.
Yeah,
you don't give it to people who know it, and you give it to someone who doesn't know it and say, "Have a look at that, make that work." When I used to when I first started working in IT, the team I joined had a person on it who seemed to be able to break anything. Basically, let's call them Nick because that's my name, and then I won't offend anybody. So their name was Nick, and they used to call it Nick testing. Give it to the person who broke everything and said, try that, see if you can break it.
If it survives them, then it's probably good to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure Samsung will have done that. So yeah, it's very unusual, isn't it?
The thing with the hole, the gap at the ends, I know to some extent it's almost inherent in the whole idea of folding something over because it can't be totally sealed down because then it wouldn't have enough room to flex.
Yeah.
But you'd think maybe you could put I don't know, a silicon gusset or I don't know. I'm not a product engineer, but just to leave a gap seemed to me to be a terrible oversight.
You see, the thing is, people, they know this. They've been making phones for a long time. People treat their phones very differently. I remember going in once to buy, was it a case? I can't remember. I went into one of our local third-party retailers to get something. And I was in the shop and he said, "Do you want a screen protector?" And I said, "No, I never have a screen protector on my phone. It lives in my pocket. Nothing else goes in the pocket other than my phone."
Mm.
And there was there was a woman, sort of about 2/3 of the way along the counter, who just looked across and did a sharp intake of breath. Because obviously that's not the way she treated her phone.
No, I must admit I've never been a fan of screen protectors.
No, I've not liked them either. So I do take care of my phones, and I don't put them in a situation where they're likely to get scratched.
I do,
But
I do my best.
But you would have thought in testing, you would have thought you'd try everything. You'd put it somewhere where you had it in your pocket and in a bag with lots of detritus and
yeah. There we go. There we go.
Anyway,
so, there we are. That has been at least delayed as a result. And if people want to read about it, just look on the web because it's everywhere. And pretty much every podcast has discussed it at great length. There we go. And it was all very strange, is the honest truth. Well, I suppose the other big story, of course, is Apple and Qualcomm. What a surprise that was.
Yeah, they're best buddies now.
Well, I'm not sure about best buddies, but I mean, they went to court. They've been winding up forever, and they went to court, and they both put forward their kind of opening arguments, and apparently they then agreed on a jury because they get to say, "I don't like him."
Yes, yeah.
I don't like him. He's got a Samsung phone. Send him away. So they did all that, and then on the next day they went, "We've settled. So can you close the case?"
You can imagine people saying, "What?
What?" I wonder if some of the jurors were thinking, "Damn, I was set for, a good 3 months in a 5-star hotel on the back of this."
I'm sure the solicitors are kicking their own ankles and thinking, "Oh,
damn, I thought I was made." Yeah.
That's it. I thought it was on the gravy train for life.
Or at least for a few years. That again. And then, of course, almost as soon as that happened, Intel announced that they were going to drop out of producing 5G modems.
It's got to be related, hasn't it?
Well, I've heard various takes on it from various people who are, much more involved in these sort of industries than obviously you and I, Nick. And some people are saying that Intel were not going to be able to deliver a 5G modem in time for Apple's sort of 2020 iPhone. They were not really making a huge amount of progress. And were losing interest because there's not much money in it for them, apparently. So Apple apparently had been doing most of the development work on the Intel 5G modems. So I'm told. I don't know that for a fact. And the general consensus seems to be Intel have said, by the way, and I've got a link in the show notes, Intel said that Apple settling with Qualcomm made up their mind that it was no longer worth continuing.
And to a certain extent, you can understand that attitude. I mean, it's got to be a huge contract. So
yes.
It's like taking the rug from under their feet, really.
On the other hand, some people have said Apple must have had, a good inkling that this was likely to happen.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both.
And
really.
then, therefore, they were painted into a corner because the only, Qualcomm thus were the only game in town, and so they didn't really have a lot of choice but to settle, so that they would be able to have 5G modem. Of course, such stratospheric multinational business deals are way outside my experience, I have to admit.
No, but I mean, in some ways, I mean, you can imagine it happening, can't you? You can imagine Intel going into a meeting with Apple, and them saying, "Well, we said we could do this, in a couple of months. Well, it might take us a bit longer. So maybe 4, maybe 6. Well, it might be a year.
Yeah.
And Apple just saying, okay, we'll have to have a think about this."
Yeah, and I suspect there's a lot more gone on behind the scenes. I suspect, but I think they're probably all related, almost certainly. Well, we know they're related because it's all about modems. So there we go. Apple and Qualcomm settled. I'm not sure they're best buddies, but they're at least stopped trying to stab each other in the back.
Yes, a reluctant partnership, maybe. But that seems to be the way the business works in these big companies, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
Most of their partnerships are fairly reluctant.
I mean, they've, I believe they've signed a 6-year licensing deal.
That's quite a long time, really, isn't it?
Yes, but they've also...
In IT terms, that's a huge amount of time.
They also apparently took a full partnership kind of franchise license, rather than simply licensing the right to do parts of modems or whatever. So it's all very complicated, and if people want to read up, go have a look. I've put some links in the show notes, but there's stuff all over the web about that one.
Bart will be having to find something else to talk about now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, never mind. I'm sure there'll be another one along shortly.
I'm sure there were some others. I'm sure I saw some this week that I didn't bother to write down, but I think Apple, this isn't in the notes, but I did notice earlier today, apparently, I think it was in Australia, Apple have lost the right to trademark One More Thing. I'm not really surprised about that. I mean, it's hardly a trademark, is it?
Well, you suddenly find yourself being sued in the middle of the supermarket.
Yeah.
As you say, oh, and one more thing. Oh.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting a Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, precisely. And there's also another one about to start, I think, something to do with the faulty power buttons on some iPhone generation several back, which has finally come to fruition. Anyway, there we go. So I'm sure Bart will have plenty of legal shenanigans to talk about.
While we're in here, have you got the keyboard story in here?
No, I haven't actually. See, there were so many.
Because that's sort of yet another example of Apple not saying they were wrong, but sort of doing something that makes you think,
Yes, that is true.
So that's where they've actually said to their stores that they need to fix broken keyboards within 24 hours, I think it is.
Yeah, I believe that's what they said.
Rather than sending them away.
Yeah, preferably, well, at the moment, it's a sort of 5 to 7 working day turnaround, which is, could be nearly a fortnight.
Yes, yeah, I think so. The point before was they were having to send them away to get them repaired, and now they're expecting people in the stores to be able to turn them around and repair them themselves, which is almost an admission that perhaps they might have had a few problems with keyboards.
Yeah, I think so. And as they said, a small number of people are experiencing difficulties with their keyboards, for which we are very sorry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there we go. No, that's not in the show notes, but yes, that is true. Apple said they were sorry that some people were having trouble with their butterfly keyboards, and they've reprioritized keyboard fixing to a one-day turnaround, apparently. Which
is a good thing. Well done, Apple.
Yes, well done. Well done.
It's a shame that sometimes they have to be cajoled, shall we say?
Yes.
into doing the right thing. At one time, they always seem to do the right thing without being, asked. But these days, sometimes they do need a little bit of persuasion.
Mm-hmm. They do indeed. I
suppose that's true for quite a long time, really. When we think back to you not holding it right and antenna gate and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've always needed a little cajoling.
Well, I suppose nobody wants to, cave too soon.
No.
But
at least they've not had the screens fall off or break in half or
yeah, indeed, or catch on fire.
Yeah.
I mean, was it somebody jokingly on Twitter said? Because that was the other thing. Talking about that was iFixit did a teardown of a Galaxy Fold. Then they were asked to take it down because they'd acquired it through a third party, and Samsung weren't happy, and therefore they complied in order to protect the third intermediary party, apparently.
Yes, my understanding was that they'd basically said they weren't surprised that they were breaking because of the way they were built.
Several people joked on Twitter, of course, that actually iFixit never meant to do a teardown. It just fell apart in our hands. Which was a little cruel.
Nice. I hadn't heard that. That's good.
It was funny, but a little cruel.
Yes, maybe so.
There we go. Because actually, on the fair side, overall, people were very impressed with the engineering. They're just not impressed with the fact that it broke.
Yes.
There we go. Talking of things breaking, Apple are recalling UK, Hong Kong, and Singapore 3-pin 13-amp plugs. I don't know if you've seen this one. This was on the BBC.
Yeah, I did. I'm sure I must have some of these.
I've got loads of them. I've got drawers full of them, Nick.
I'm not sure I actually use any of them.
Well, no, nor do I. Nor do I.
I
Because
think I must have some.
back in the day, when you bought pretty much any Apple device that came with a charger, you would get, the charging block, an extension lead, particularly laptops, and you'd also get one of these plugs. So you could put the plug on to your charger and then plug it into the main socket.
Yeah.
And most people like me, why on earth would you want to do that on a laptop? Because you usually need as much lead as you can get. So, of course, they don't give you the extension lead anymore, do you? You have to buy that separately.
That's right.
Yeah.
I must admit, I found it a bit bizarre, really. I explained it to someone at work, and they said, and? Sort of, how is that a story? Because, if you look at the statement, it said, in the very rare cases, affected Apple 3-prong wall plug adapters designed primarily for use in the United Kingdom, Singapore, and Hong Kong may break and create a risk of electrical shock if exposed metal parts are touched. Well, that's true of any plug.
That's pretty much true.
If you touch the metal bits, it's not a good idea.
As far as the only, there's only 6 reported incidents of this happening. So, out of the millions upon millions they've made, that's not.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm looking at the article. It says, I think the one I looked at yesterday has got this greyish.
Yeah, well, they're the new ones. The ones with the grey insert are the new ones. The older ones, it affects. By the way, anybody listening, this affects plugs manufactured, I believe, between 2003 and 2010. So
okay, so I'm not going to have that many for that period. Actually, thinking about it.
That's the original ones, which are full UK plug height, which is about 3/4 of an inch thick, and with smooth sides and a white insert where it goes over the metal part on the charger.
Oh, in which case I'm not sure. No, I don't think I have got any of these in that case. I only bought my first iMac in 2007.
And you'd only would have got them.
And that has the iMac doesn't have one of those sort of leads. So.
No, it doesn't. You would only have got one at that period. You would have got one with a laptop, an Apple laptop, early iPhones, I think.
Well, I think the MacBook Air I gave to my niece had a fixed plug on it. I'm almost certain it did.
Some do. Or well, they slide on. Once they're on, you'd hardly notice. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah.
If you've got the ones which are thinner, which are only about a ½ inch thick, with the finger channels down the side, those are not affected. And if you've got ones with a grey insert, they're not affected.
So my understanding is that you take this into Apple and you give them a serial number. Does it matter what serial number?
Well,
Any serial number?
Basically, apparently there's a website. Go to Apple support and you can type in. Basically, if you've got a fat one with no finger grips on the side and it's got a white insert, you should probably, might wish to think about returning it. As I say,
however, it's not broken. You're not in any danger of being electrocuted.
No, it's not dangerous in that sense. It's somebody suggested, it might have been Steve on Carl's show, that if you have one of the bigger chargers off like a larger laptop, and you plug that directly into the wall with one of these plugs, if you were to, hit it in some way, it might be heavy enough to break the insert out, thus exposing some of the inside.
Okay, that makes sense.
But as he said, that's pretty much all he could think. Apparently, larger stores are being sent replacement plugs to dole out. So people go in with one and go, here, I've got these old ones, and they'll give you a new one.
I did find it amazing that someone said, it might have been on Cole's show again, that there were 12. They'd had 12 possible failures, and that's why they were recording them all.
I think it was incredible. Well, I read 6.
Oh, six, and maybe it was 6.
Anyway, which is what I'm saying.
That's a very tiny number.
That's a very, very small number out of the millions upon millions of those that must be manufactured. As I say, I've got a drawer full. I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah, I don't think I am either.
I'm not sure I've ever used one, which is why I've got hundreds of them laying around.
Yes,
because they're basically a UK plug with with the figure 8 connector, like the ones you plug into small radios or the like. There we go. Was it 3 amp or 5 amp lead?
Something like that.
Yeah, there we go.
I've got a fair number of those around, but but not these plugs.
There we go. So that's that. If you have some and you're worried about them, talk to Apple. But they've got to, as far as I can tell, they've got to be at least 9 years old to qualify. Anything newer than that's apparently safe. So there we are. There was a bit of a furore this week as well because apparently Apple have been pulling third-party quote-unquote screen time apps. I've seen a variety of headlines ranging from the somewhat hyperbolic, Apple clamping down on apps which, help you fight iPhone addiction, to Apple pulling apps which help protect children, that sort of thing, to some rather more moderate ones, which says Apple is clamping down on third-party screen time apps due to privacy abuses. Also on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, but somebody, it might have been Benedict Evans, or it might have been Ben Thompson. It doesn't matter. They pointed out that these sort of apps, if they can monitor what you're doing in order to, restrict your screen time, to control what apps you have access to, what sites you go to, and so on, then they have to have full and open access to your phone, mostly by installing, one of these profiles, which means you are in effect opening up yourself to monitoring every single thing you do, which is not necessarily a particularly great plan. And also, somebody pointed out, of course, that it's all in the phrasing. An app which protects your children from iPhone addiction could equally be, phrased as a creepy app that lets you spy on somebody else and control their their device. It would be a bit like that thing that we mentioned before, the Saudi Arabia, track your wife kind of apps. I mean, that's, we were saying, that's, at least to Western eyes, a highly dubious proposition. And what
I mean, Apple are constantly having to do this sort of balancing act, aren't they, between offering functionality and securing and keeping people secure and offering them privacy. And some people don't like it.
No. Well,
they would prefer to be able to do what they want to do. And in all honesty, their intentions may be completely honest.
yes.
But the fact is, Apple's got to draw the line somewhere.
Well, Phil Schiller said that they are pulling third-party screen time apps due to privacy abuses. Tony Fadell apparently is called Apple Screen Time a rush job, but that's a whole different matter. 9 to 5 Mac, Phil Schiller said, Phil Schiller explains that Apple is pulling third-party screen time apps which abused the mobile device management system to track all data and activity on children's devices in order to present this information to parents. Schiller said this is a privacy issue which cannot be left to continue, and Apple will not reject apps which use alternative methods other than MDM. The point here, this is a bit like the enterprise certificates.
Yes.
In that the mobile device management profiles is designed for enterprise. This is designed for companies which hand out, iOS devices to their employees and wish to be able to control exactly what is installed on them. And that's, again, like the enterprise thing, it's expressly forbidden for non-enterprise use. So, there we go. And also in an email, which isn't in that one, somewhere else, Phil did mention several screen time apps, which he said are very good and, are perfectly allowable. So, they're not, it's not, some people have accused them of pulling it because they have their own screen time app, and as far as I can tell, that is not the reason. They are not telling all screen time monitoring apps that they have to change or get out, only ones who have done things that they're not supposed to be doing. So, Here we are. I suppose that leads on to this one. Apple's CEO Tim Cook speaks out about doing what's right despite backlash. Uncle Tim, of course, appeared at the Time, I believe, Time 100 Summit. And there's a link here. He gave he was on stage being interviewed, and he basically said that Apple believe in doing the right thing, and it's about policy, not politics. And there we go. It's worth watching. It's not very long. I'm sure somewhere there's probably a much longer version. The link I've got here is to
Yeah,
Fortune.
I like this comment. I don't know whether this is an Americanism, but he says, "I try not to get wrapped up in a pretzel about who we upset."
yeah. I think that's
Rather like that.
tied in a knot. I guess that's
Yes,
the
yeah.
English equivalent thereof. Yes, it says. Cook said it's. We are a deeply free person in mindset, but he believes that the tech industry needs to be regulated. The tech industry is facing intense criticism over sharing of vast troves of customer information, which, of course, Apple can, on the whole, say that they don't do. And he also apparently has indicated that Apple are looking to do much more work in the healthcare side of things. There we are. So that's worth looking out if you want to hear what Tim Cook has to say. I have to say, he seemed, sometimes when you listen to Tim Cook, you feel very much that he's reading off a prepared statement. In this, he seemed quite animated. I got the impression that he was speaking.
It's obviously something he cares about a lot, doesn't it?
I think it is. As he said, I watched it, and he said, for example, we try not to comment on things where we don't feel we have any standing. By that, he said, but what I mean by that is, we don't want to just be talking heads spouting opinions and adding to the noise. So, the things that we comment on, we are things that we feel we have something to contribute, be it, the environmental side or, personal privacy and the like.
Talking about healthcare, I bought myself a Quadio blood pressure monitor.
Okay.
It's cool. It's very simple to set up. You just pair it. You hold the phone near to it, and it sort of pairs Bluetooth, and then you just set it off from your phone, and it measures your blood pressure. Very cool.
Very cool.
So if anyone's thinking of buying one, I think I got it for £83 or something like that on Amazon.
Okay. Well,
and if you need to monitor your blood pressure,
of course,
then it's it works. And that's all you want from those sort of things, really. You want to slap them on, get it done, and go do something else.
Very much so. Very much so. Well, if you've got a link for that, Nick, put it in the show notes.
Oh yes, I will do. I'll sort it out.
We'll put it in the worth of chirps. So what else has happened? There was a small bug apparently in the iOS App Store, which was preventing people from updating or purchasing any apps. Apparently, they were getting stuck in a confirm dialogue loop.
Oh dear, that's not good for Apple, is it?
No, it didn't affect everybody, and apparently they patched it quite quickly. But there's a link.
Yes,
here.
I can imagine they'd be running around like headless chickens to get that one fixed.
Yes,
that's their revenue, not what.
Yeah, people were apparently being presented with the such and such, and after they clicked I accept, it would simply pop back up again, preventing them. And the only way out basically was to cancel and close the App Store app and go about your business. Yeah, so there you go. That was, but that was fixed. That was fixed with at the back end apparently. There we go. What else? This one was this is sort of a Apple related, as it were. A surfer lost his Apple Watch whilst body surfing, and it survived. According to the headline, survived 6 months at sea. That's again a somewhat hyperbolic statement, I would say. He says in the article basically that he was body surfing and he lost his Apple Watch. He realised that it had come off at some point, and so he did the find my device thing and set it to the lost mode so that it as a displays that I'm lost. Please ring whatever number, and nothing came of that, so he gave up and bought himself a new watch. Anyway, 6 months later, a beachcomber found the watch on the shoreline, and apparently, it doesn't explain here exactly how. I can only assume that he took it home and had an Apple Watch himself or themselves. I don't know. I don't think it specifies. And put it on charge, and it fired up because there's no way it would have a charge in it after 6 months.
You would think not.
No, you would think not. Anyway, however, they then contacted the surfer, and he was reunited with his watch, which is apparently still working perfectly well. He described it as having a slight haze on the screen, but otherwise being relatively unharmed. So
That's pretty amazing, isn't
that's
it?
pretty good. Although, yeah,
If it had actually physically been at sea, I mean, saying it had been 6 months at sea makes it sound a little bit like it had been off on an adventure.
yeah.
And this one's particularly for Alistair. I reckon what happened is it fell through a small wormhole in space to go and live a total Apple Watch orientated lifestyle, and probably ended up driving a limousine for a family of cheap green retractable pencils. Alistair will know what I'm talking about.
I'm pretty sure that well, I mean, I don't know, nobody knows, but I suspect that what actually has happened is that yes, it fell in the water, it spent some time in the water. I mean, Apple say they're not waterproof, but they're pretty highly water resistant.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you can swim then, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how deep the water would be where this guy was surfing. And then I suspect that it was washed up on the shore by the waves and then probably spent quite a lot of time buried in the sand.
Yes, I think there's a good chance that's the case. But the fact that it survived and it's working again is a good.
I mean, that doesn't mean that it had a good donkey in seawater twice a day, does it? But somebody picked it up, and as I say, apparently the screen is a little bit hazy, which I suspect is as much sand abrasion as anything else, and some salt ingress therefrom. But there we go. So there you go. It survived 6 months, at the very least, on the beach. And was returned to him.
I remember seeing some time ago, there was a video of someone filming seagulls with a GoPro, and one of the seagulls decided it would take the GoPro,
yes.
But it carried on filming while it sort of took it a little way away, and then he dropped it on the ground and jumped on it a bit.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it snatches the GoPro, flies away. And flies it off, and then it's like a pecking at it, isn't it?
That's right. And you could just see someone running in the distance.
In the background, running towards it. Get off my camera, you thieving seagulls. Yes. And that's not the first. Similar story was Buster Haney of Cult of Mac on the Cultcast. He does a lot of cliff jumping.
Oh right, yeah.
Yes, in in America, he's keen to go out into the desert and jump off cliffs into pools of water, whatever floats your boat. Anyway,
indeed. Good luck to him.
Whatever. And he lost an Apple Watch doing that. And it was returned to him several weeks later when somebody found it in a creek running out of one of the pools that he jumped into. Still working apparently. So,
what?
Although he's lost more than one watch doing that, you would think that he might have learned either not to use his watch while jumping off cliffs, or to get a strap with a rather more secure fastening.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, once you could forgive, sort of second or third time, perhaps that's not a good idea, Buster. There we go. Oh dear. Apple apparently poached Intel's lead 5G engineer in February to expand its own smartphone modem team. This kind of ties up with the whole Apple-Qualcomm settlement was influenced Intel to bail out. There's not really a lot to say about that. Apparently, they poached a leading 5G engineer from Intel, which probably means that they were already aware that Intel was not going to deliver the goods. There. And I think that's pretty much all of the Apple stories. Oh, well, we've got Apple's Johnny Ive was interviewed by Document Journal, apparently, along with Kim Jones of Dior. I won't really go into that. There's a link in the show notes. It's an interesting read. Writing's a bit airy-fairy, to be honest, but quite interesting to see what Johnny has to say. He's as vague as ever. He doesn't let anything on.
Yes, I mean, if you understand what this paragraph means, you probably get a lot out of it. So here's a paragraph for you. We remain physical beings in a physical world. and I'm shocked at how much work is done with little understanding of what's physical and what's three-dimensional and what's real. So there you go.
The biggest takeaway that most people got of it is Johnny Ive says he feels like he's living 2 years in the future. That's because you are, Johnny.
Yes, he probably is. He's designing stuff that will come out later. Yes,
of course he is. He's got an Apple Watch 7. We know that. Stupid. Of course, he lives 2 years in the future. There we go. But if you can get over the somewhat airy-fairy writing, it's not a bad read. Right. Well, there's no John's Hardware store from Nemo this week because Easter and Passover have disrupted the delivery schedule to the hardware store. So I don't know. What should we press on a little bit more? What else have we got? Overcast have now added support for sharing of clips. So you may have seen, if you go on Twitter, that short clips of podcasts are now cropping up with regular frequency. I'm sure the novelty will wear off, but there we go. That was Overcast. They've added that.
It's good. It's still being developed.
Yes. Oh, yes. Marco Arment is always, messing about with it, adding features. This one caught my eye, Nick. We accidentally created a wonder material which could revolutionise batteries and electronics.
The number of times I've heard that said over the last few years.
Indeed. But this was an interesting read. I forget exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to make sheets of some kind of phosphorus-based material, I think. We were trying to separate layers of phosphorus crystals into two-dimensional sheets. Instead,
as you do.
Yeah, as you do, obviously. Instead, our technique created tiny tagliatelle-like ribbons, 1 atom thick and 100 or so atoms across, but up to 100,000 atoms long. We spent 3 years honing the production process before announcing our findings. Apparently, these two-dimensional ribbons have a number of remarkable properties. Their width-to-length ratio is similar to the cables spanning the Golden Gate Bridge. They are incredibly uniform, but they have a manipulable width, apparently, which allows their properties such as weather and how they conduct electricity to be fine-tuned. They are also incredibly flexible, which means they can follow the contours of surfaces they're put on and even be twisted. Here we go. There's quite a long article, so I won't go into great depth.
The corrugated structure of phosphorine nanoribbons. That's a cool name.
Isn't it?
Means that the charging ions that power batteries could soon move up to 1,000 times faster. Oh, well, that's important because one of the problems we've got with current battery technology is that you can't charge things really quickly because they just get very hot.
Yes, that is true.
And you just have to desperately try and keep them cool. Whereas if you can actually make the ions move more quickly within the material.
This would mean a significant decrease in charging time and an increase in capacity of approximately 50%.
Having said that, there's been an awful lot of battery potential improvements over the last few years. Most of them don't scale up from the laboratory.
This is true. Although, obviously, these people have spent apparently 3 years refining the production process.
Okay.
That was their big thing. This is the big reveal: is that they've made these things. They can make
a lot of them.
They actually said in here somewhere in this article. Well, as I said, it's quite long. The guys actually said, guys and girls, no doubt, have said that many of these things are announced only to find that they cannot be commercially produced. These phosphorine nanoribbons have already navigated major obstacles in the route to commercialisation. Finding a scalable production method takes years for most new materials. Some never see the light of day. Added to this, phosphorus is a relatively abundant and easily extracted material. Since our ribbons are formed in liquids, inks or paints can easily be produced to manipulate them at scale using low-cost methods such as spray coating or even inkjet printing. There we go.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Well, I mean, I'm always excited to hear that there are yet more new experiments with batteries because there's no doubt in my mind that batteries are going to become
Oh,
more
very
and
much.
more and more important over the next 10 or 20 years.
I mean,
And
what's it say here? It
so,
means
yeah.
in future batteries could possibly use sodium ions rather than lithium ions, as known
Oh,
lithium reserves may not be able to meet the huge projected increase in battery demand.
yeah.
And extraction of this metal can be environmentally harmful. Sodium, by contrast, is abundant and cheap. Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah, I mean, lithium itself, the lithium is pretty abundant, but it does tend to come from one part of the world,
Mm.
which makes it problematic, whereas sodium will be everywhere.
Well,
So,
you take sodium, and you can extract sodium from seawater
yes.
or salt.
So, well, that sounds, yeah, quietly exciting.
Quite, yes, like all these things, no doubt. No, they don't mention any kind of timescale. What shall we say, 5 to 10 years out?
Yeah, most of 5 to 10 years, aren't they? If they
um,
ever arrive.
There we go. And they're also saying it could unlock the potential of hydrogen as an efficient fuel because, they might be able to use this to help crack the hydrogen production conundrum.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, there we go. So that intrigued me. I like those sort of things.
Yeah, me too.
That was very interesting. And then we've got I've got a link here. We won't go into it. Apple won't like this. Run Mac OS on any PC. This is a YouTube thing. Basically, it boils down to building a Linux box and then running a VM. It's quite involved. If you're interested in that sort of thing, go and have a look. But it will allow you to effectively run what appears to be, what is Mac OS on any PC hardware.
Oh, I've been looking this week, actually. I stumbled across one or two different videos. Someone was saying you could actually build a better Mac Mini than the Mac Mini from an Intel NUC.
Okay.
Which looked interesting. I must admit, I did go and have a look at the cost of Intel NUCs, and they a sort of bare bones system starts at about 360 quid. So they're not exactly cheap.
No.
And then you've got to add memory and storage, and then you've got to do all the fiddling to get Mac OS on it. And there are always going to be some things that don't quite work.
That's almost a case of, unless you're really into doing it for the sake of doing it, because it's there, you might just be better off buying.
Well, yeah, you might. Yeah, you probably are going to save a bit of money if you're prepared to go down that route, but you are going to have to jump through hoops a bit to get it done.
Yes, indeed.
And when Apple updates their OS, you may have to stay on the old OS for a while.
You may indeed, until somebody figures out how to patch it.
Yeah.
I can't remember who posted this in the Slack room. Might have been Mac Jim. He puts a lot of stuff in there. A new aircraft rises like a balloon. This was on the BBC News. It's I'd be interested to hear what Ivor the airship Pope has to say about this.
Yes, it would be interesting. Yeah.
This is a different kind of concept with a different kind of purpose. The idea is apparently that it's effectively pretty much a neutrally buoyant helium filled kind of airship with wings. And it's solar powered and it contains like a compressor. And so in order to rise, you expel the ordinary air and it rises up. And then you pump some air into it to make it slightly heavier than air, and it will attempt to descend, thus picking up speed, and then will glide on its wings.
Interesting.
And the idea is apparently that it would kind of rise and then glide and then rise and then glide. The idea being that it could stay aloft for a very long time.
Okay, so that's interesting because was it Google who were talking about putting up satellites?
Something like that.
Like flying satellites, as it were.
Yes, they would. Yes, they were doing. It says the Phoenix is an unmanned aerial vehicle designed to stay in the air indefinitely using a new type of propulsion. She looks a little like an airship, except airships don't have wings. It's a proper aeroplane, says the Professor Andrew Ray.
I could imagine that Google Earth and all that sort of stuff would find this sort of stuff interesting.
Central fuselage is
keep it up there taking photos for a long time.
Yes. its ability to breathe, to switch between heavier or lighter than air, doesn't make the plane go up and down. It is the key to driving it forward. It moves through the air like a porpoise through water. There we go.
The technical term is an ultra-long endurance autonomous aircraft.
The point is to create a cheaper alternative to launching a satellite. There we go. There we are. Interesting. Very interesting. This is described here as almost expendable.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
So there we are. That was quite a fascinating read. It's on the BBC News. There we are. What else? There was a deaf boy who's had a brain implant so that he can hear. This was also on the BBC News. Fascinating again. Nothing to do with Apple, of course, but I like stories like this. We all like stories like this, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
A pioneering brain surgery has allowed a 4-year-old Theo to hear sounds and to speak to his mum. He was born deaf and was not expected to be able to speak. He could not have a cochlear implant or hearing aids because he does not have any auditory nerves. So 2 years ago, he was fitted with an auditory brainstem implant.
Goodness gracious.
There we go. NHS have called this surgery truly life-changing and said it will be making the procedure routinely available on the NHS. I'm not sure how routine people with no auditory nerves are, but
no.
But a fascinating. There's a video here of him. It's uplifting. It's an uplifting story.
Jolly good.
Which is nice.
Like good stories.
We do like good stories. Luminary, who we discussed a little while ago, managed to upset a whole bunch of podcasters and publishers and networks in their first week. Loads of people pulled their content. Not a good start for them.
This is the podcast aggregator type idea.
Yes, yeah. They want to. They wanted to have a load of kind of exclusive material, and then to aggregate a lot of other material which you can listen to for free. And the idea being that you would then be enticed to give them money to listen to the exclusive material. But they, the Spotify group, so that's Spotify itself and Anchor and what was the other one? Something else. They weren't going to be on it, and several really big groups of publishers have pulled their material. A lot of independent people were unhappy because apparently they were using a proxy to pull people's requests. So all in all, a pretty poor start for them.
Yes.
There we are. Links in there from The Verge. Some of it maybe they can fix. Some of it maybe not. Who knows? We're not keen on that anyway. We're not keen on the whole luminary thing. Did you know this one was a sort of little piece of fluff? It was 20 years ago that Microsoft changed how we mouse forever by this. It wasn't the first, but they brought out their optical mouse.
Oh right, okay. No, I didn't know that.
It was. This is on Gizmodo. 20 years ago, Microsoft changed how we mouse forever. April 1999, Microsoft introduced an update to its IntelliMouse line of input devices. It didn't look much different than its predecessors, had a few buttons and a scroll wheel, but it introduced a technology to the masses that brought an end to the prehistoric days of cleaning dirt and grime out of your computer mouse.
Trackball fluff. Yay!
Yes. So there we go. There's a piece here with this bloke reminiscing about how he bought one and it was expensive, but it changed his life, basically. And as he says in his article, they weren't the first people to do it, but they were the first people to launch a relatively affordable optical mouse, which didn't need a special mat or any other kind of shenanigans.
It's one of those things that always amazes me. When you think back, when you're old enough to remember back quite a long way, it is just how many of these things we take for granted now.
We don't even think about it.
There might only be small inventions. We were talking about that battery thing. That could be huge. But vast majority of people will just know that their batteries have got better.
Yes.
But it's all those little things that change that just become part of your life. I mean, look at the iPhone. I yet again found myself watching the Steve do his thing on stage, introducing the original iPhone this week.
Oh, yes.
I don't know how I stumbled across it. I thought, maybe I'll watch it one more time because it is fun.
It is a good. Are you getting it yet?
Yes. But yeah, it's amazing how all these little things go by, and they become just part of our everyday lives.
Yeah, you don't even really notice. It's often only in hindsight that you can see.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much things have changed. Yeah.
Because I haven't got a mouse on my Surface here. I use a trackpad. So
yes, well, that of course is the other thing. Mice are now, very much a desktop thing now, aren't they?
Yes, very much. Yeah, very much.
There we are. What else have we got? We've gone a decent amount of time, so I think we'll skip forward a little bit. Facebook unintentionally. Can you hear me air quoting here? Unintentionally uploaded the email contact lists of 1.5 million users.
I can hear them saying now, whoops.
Whoops, sorry. I don't know how that happened.
No, I just click this button here and I don't, well, so.
I can't remember. It might have been the Vergecast. They had their, list of topics for the Vergecast, and it was like topic 1, I don't know, the Galaxy Fold, topic 2, something else, topic 3, something else, topic 4, Facebook. Am I right? So we're just going to have that as the standing last item where we just go, and Facebook. Am I right? There we are. So again, digital trends, we've got a piece. Facebook unintentionally uploaded the email contacts of 1.5 million users. Oops, sorry.
Well done, Facebook.
Yeah, don't know how that happened. This isn't in the show notes, but apparently for those who could bear it, Mark Zuckerberg now has his own podcast.
Really?
Yes. And it's called something stunning, like Talking Technology and something with Mark Zuckerberg or something. You'll find it if you search for it. There's an article. We listen to Mark Zuckerberg's podcast, so you don't have to. Apparently, the first one ran to nearly 3 hours long.
Goodness gracious!
So there you go. If you think that you could stomach 3 hours of Mark Zuckerberg talking, go ahead.
Even you and I don't go that long.
No, we do not. No, we don't go that long. I'm glad to say we don't.
Try.
We've tried, but we did. No. Okay. Apparently, watch out for this. Trend Labs Security Intelligence blog. There's a window. Well, it says Windows app which runs on Mac, downloads info stealer and adware. This is not strictly. It's not strictly true in the thing. Some dodgy downloads from, shall we say, less than reputable sites, pirates, have been found to download, circumvented apps. Say no more. But researchers have found within the package a .exe file. And of course, a .exe is Windows only, but it would appear that this is merely to help it evade detection. And it contains code which can be executed on your Mac and will then download nasty things.
Right, okay.
Short answer, don't download dodgy apps from dodgy sites.
Dodgy sites, yes.
If you want something, go to a reputable site and get hold of it in the proper manner. And Proton Mail is now offering epileptic. I believe that's is it epileptic? I don't know. Anyway, curve cryptography for advanced security and faster speeds.
Oh, elliptic.
Elliptic. There we go.
Elliptic curve
cryptography. I've turned it on.
Cryptography.
Cryptography. Yes. Anyway, I don't understand how it works really. I've read it. I read the article. It's clever and it's quicker and more secure and all the rest. So I've turned it on. Let's put it that way. If you're interested, if you're a Proton Mail user, follow the link, follow the instructions, turn it on. And that's pretty much it. The worth of chirps, apart from Nick's blood pressure monitor, which he will send a link for later. I found a site for ethical alternatives and resources. This is an open list of resources for ethical living, from browsers, books, TED Talks to applications, and it's at ethical.net. There you go. Go take a look. If you, it contains all sorts of things, browsers, various apps, things, some of them, I mean, obviously, quick look here. You've got Firefox, Tor, Brave, Vivaldi, search engines, email services. Some of them are, ethical because they are products which, for example, we have an email service here called Runbox. This is an email service which is powered purely by hydroelectricity, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're worried about that sort of thing, there's a lot of items in here, obviously, which are about security, zero carbon hosting at no extra cost. This is a company called Netcetera, all that sort of thing. All right, GreenNet, a not-for-profit collective offering hosting to supporters of the environment and human rights, for example. Whole load of things. Go take a look. You might find something that appeals to you if you're interested in that sort of thing. There's a free app to strip away all the junk from the Gmail web interface. And this comes from a former Google chief designer, as it happens. What's his name? Simplified Gmail is an extension for Google Chrome. So, you've got to be happy using Google Chrome and Gmail, obviously. It was created by Michael Leggett. He was the designer at Google for a period of time. He co-founded Google Inbox, which was an alternative email app which Google have just shut down. And its loyal and vocal user base were not pleased. The donkey, he was not pleased. Right, the simplified Gmail extension is quite simple. It was designed to strip away all of the UI elements that many deem to be clutter, leaving users only with the pieces of the Gmail UI which they need. There we go. The guy who made it obviously says it contains nothing but a little bit of CSS and some JavaScript, and that he doesn't, it's free, and he did it because he can, and it doesn't collect anything, and so on and so forth. So if you're into that, if you're a Gmail user on Chrome, you might want to take a look at that. And that's about it, really. I've got one last one, Jumbo the Privacy Assistant. This is a single app which lets you clean up your personal data across social media apps and internet services. I downloaded it. It's free. It's on the on the App Store. I looked at it. The only one that applied to me was, would you like to clean your Google search history? So I did yes, please, and it said, what do you want to delete? A week, a month, a year, everything you've ever recorded. So I did that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's sort of deleting old stuff that you might not want anymore.
You can use it to clean up your tweets. You can use it to do Instagram and a whole load of other things. Oh no, Instagram's under development, I think. But anyway, it's it's free, and if you feel that you've got lots of stuff on Facebook you want to dispose of or whatever, it will help you with that. And that's about it, really.
Cool.
So there we are. Well, we've done a good session yet again, Nick. So I guess we should probably wrap the show up. So time for you to do your usual piece, I guess.
Okay, so you can find me on Spligosh on Twitter occasionally, and you can hear me on this show and Bart Bouchot's Let's Talk Apple on occasion.
Excellent. I am, of course, on the Twitter as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. You can find the show as @Essential Apple. All our stuff is over at essentialapple.com. And if you listen to the show but haven't been to the website recently, do go take a look. We've had some very interesting posts lately. We've had a variety of reviews by Mac Jim. We've had some nice infographics as guest postings from a nice lady called Ellie Summers. We've had 100 plugins from Skylum. They sent us a list of 100 plus Photoshop type plugins. I published that. There we go. thank you as ever to all the people who support us by Patreon or otherwise. Thank you to the Slack room. If you want to join the Slack room, follow the link. Because half the stories come from the Slack room, let's be honest. And I think that's probably enough. So until next week, I think we'll say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Essential Apple podcast, and I'd like to say if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com and you will find links to both Patreon and the Pinecast Tips Jar, where you can make a donation towards the costs of the show, or even if you're really keen, you could set up a recurring payment. And thank you very, very much to all the people who already do support us. We really do appreciate you very much indeed. This show is, of course, part of the My Mac Podcasting Network, where you can find a variety of other shows like the My Mac Podcast with Guy and Gaz, the G-Men, Tech Fan with Tim and David, the Nintendo Club podcast, the geekiest show ever, the Three Geeky Ladies, Bart Bouchot's and his wonderful Let's Talk Apple, and possibly some more that I forgot. So why not go over to mymac.com, take a look at the available podcasts, and take a listen.
Hello and good evening. This is Gaz for the MyMac podcast. And we know you have your pick of high-quality downloadable audio content, and we appreciate that you choose ours.
Quite right, Ode Bean. This is Guy, and we're here to say that the My Mac podcast is the right choice to make. Intelligent, cultured, and downloaded by only the finest and most educated people.
Indeed. In fact, we restrict our delightful missives to only those best suited... Guy, I can't go on with this. Who are we kidding? The MyMac podcast is probably one of the most accessible shows there is.
Gaz, we're trying to up our reputation here.
Oh, shut it. Listen, folks, tired of tech podcasts that talk over your head and go on too long, taking themselves so seriously, you'd think they were the ones making the product? Then you should listen to the mymac.com podcast. At least 3 good chuckles per segment.
If my math is right, that's about 10 laughs per show.
Right. Because 3 times 3 is 10. Sometimes I really wonder about you, Guy.
No need to wonder where to find the podcast. Just go to iTunes and search for My Mac. Subscribe and jump into the fun.
You know, we're part of the Stoplight Network, and there are a lot of important people there.
Well, we did say we hardly know anyone important. Though there was that time I was less than 30 feet away from the Woz, and I could have sworn we made eye contact.
Most likely, he was having stomach cramps.
Yeah, that would explain why he was doubled over at the time.
The mymac.com podcast. Enjoy it. Over a cuppa.
Has been the Essential Apple Podcast. Goodbye and thank you for listening.